On Friday, April 1st, 2017, 21-year-old Micaela García left the club at around 5 a.m. and sent her boyfriend a message saying she was on her way home, but he never heard back from her. Her phone went silent, and just a couple of blocks from her apartment, a neighbor found a single sandal lying in the street. It was hers, but she was nowhere to be found. Witnesses later shared terrifying details from that night, details that pointed to one possibility: Micaela had been abducted. But where was she now, and who took her? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Today we're going to be talking about Micaela García, a young woman whose story just really stuck with me, not only because it's so heartbreaking and just unfair and just terrible what happened to her, but because it's frustrating and scary. It's scary thinking about how she was just walking home, something so many people do, but often with a constant worry about who might be lurking nearby. She didn't know what was coming, and that's a feeling that I think especially for us women know far too well. We're going to go through what actually happened to Micaela, what happened the night she disappeared, who confessed, how the trial played out, and why there are still answers needed years later. Plus, I'll talk about how her story actually created a law to help protect women in Argentina. I really appreciate you guys all so much for being here and for listening to her story. I know these cases are just so hard to listen to week after week. You know, it's exhausting reading about how often this happens, but like I say in every single video, it's just so important to spread awareness about what goes on in this world, and especially with Micaela's story, you know, maybe it can help someone out there. A special thank you to the Familia members watching this early before it goes live. As a reminder, Familia members get early access to every single video, they get exclusive non-true crime bonus videos and other exclusive perks, plus a percentage of all memberships goes towards the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, so as a member, you are continuing to make a difference. Also, if you guys have not followed my new Instagram page, I will have it linked down below. It's annoying that we had to start over and start fresh with the new account, but on that Instagram, I share kind of smaller versions of these videos and summaries of the cases that we cover, as well as other important information about what's going on in the true crime community. So also, I ran into a subscriber the other day out at dinner. She was absolutely so sweet. So if you're watching this video, it was so nice to meet you. Anytime someone approaches me, letting me know that they watch my videos or, you know, follow me on TikTok, it honestly means the world to me. So I just wanted to shout out this subscriber because she was so sweet to me. And yeah, anyways, that is completely off topic, but with that, let's jump right in and let's talk about what happened to Micaela. Micaela García was born on August 9th, 1995 to her parents Andrea and Nestor in the city of Concepción del Uruguay, in Argentina's Entre Rios province. She grew up in a very close-knit family as the only daughter with her three brothers. From an early age, it was clear that she was very bright. Her teachers often noticed that she seemed bored during class activities, which led them to believe that the lessons just weren't challenging enough for her. After undergoing some evaluations, it was confirmed that Micaela was academically 2 years ahead of her peers. Her parents were incredibly proud once they heard this. They just always knew that she was a gifted child and a curious child. That curiosity was one of her defining traits. She constantly asked questions, always wanting to understand the why behind everything. It sometimes, you know, got her into trouble with her teachers who honestly just weren't used to students questioning the way things were done. But that boldness and that way of thinking outside of the box is what made Micaela who she was. Friends and family describe her as tenacious, headstrong, and stubborn in the best ways. You know, she was always standing up for herself and for those around her. As she grew older, Micaela became deeply inspired by Eva Perón, Argentina's former First Lady, who was known for her advocacy for women's suffrage, workers' rights, and social welfare. Micaela just admired her passion and commitment to justice, and she just felt a really strong connection to her legacy. That inspiration soon turned into action. She got involved in her community through a youth-led political and social movement focused on building a fair, more equitable city. She also became an active voice in the hashtag Ni Una Menos movement, which we have mentioned on this channel way too much. We've talked about how important this movement is, and she participated by marching in protests and demanding justice for victims of gender-based violence. Her activism didn't stop there, though. She volunteered in neighborhoods, organized community events for Pride Day, and worked to support members of the LGBT LGBTQ plus community. Micaela even helped organize a film screening and discussion in her hometown, which shed light on trans issues in Argentina. She was determined, to create a world where everyone, regardless of gender, socioeconomic status, or identity, felt safe, welcomed and valued. I honestly just find it so just beautiful and just admirable how aware she was at such a young age. It's very inspiring. The fact that she was leading these conversations and was, physically participating in this movement, it's just honestly so incredible. Apart from her activism, she was also very physically active. She grew up doing gymnastics at very competitive levels. She played volleyball and had a huge love for walking. No matter how hot or sunny it was, she never missed the opportunity to, enjoy a walk outside and basically to wherever she needed to go. Whether it was to go visit her friends or to go see her boyfriend Alejandro, whom she had been dating since November of 2013. Now, Alejandro has spoken out and he had some, really beautiful memories to share about Micaela. He recalled a time when Micaela was walking around 25 blocks to and from her summer job in the heat of that particular summer. But honestly, Micaela didn't mind it. She didn't mind the heat. She didn't mind that it was like burning hot outside. She just loved it. She just enjoyed moving her body so much. When it was time for college, Micaela chose to study physical education teaching, attending classes at the Gualeguay campus. With her passion for being active, she wanted to inspire kids to do the same and to be healthy. So, alongside her college duties, she remained deeply committed to activism. During the week, she lived on campus with a roommate, but every single weekend, she would return to her hometown to be with her family, to see her friends, and to also be with her boyfriend Alejandro. Along with, visiting her boyfriend and her family, she would go back into her hometown to participate in local activism events. Although Micaela was incredibly driven and accomplished for her age, she was still young and she just wanted to have fun. She liked going out to clubs and spending time with her friends. So on the night of Friday, April 1st, 2017, Micaela attended a party for everyone that was a part of the physical education major at a club called King in her college town. She got ready, she put on animal print shorts, a white tank top, sandals, put her apartment keys in her short pockets, and headed out to the club. When she got there, she was seen dancing, enjoying the music, and just enjoying the night with her friends. Everything seemed to be going well until around 5 o'clock in the morning, which was now technically Saturday, April 2nd. This is when her friend said that something changed. Micaela appeared kind of bummed out of nowhere, and something just seemed off. Later, they learned that she was actually having a small argument with her boyfriend, which was likely the reason for her change in mood. Her friend said that Micaela announced that she wanted to go home and just basically call it a night. So at around 5:34 in the morning, Micaela sent a text to her boyfriend Alejandro, who again was back in her hometown, letting him know that she was leaving the club and was now walking back to her apartment. True to her love for walking, Micaela began the roughly 15-block walk back home. A few hours later, though, at 9 o'clock in the morning, Micaela was supposed to be getting on a bus to go back to her hometown, where again she would go to visit her family and her boyfriend on the weekends, and she also had plans to attend a friend's baby shower. When Micaela didn't respond to her boyfriend's messages that morning, he thought that maybe Micaela had overslept and missed the bus, or maybe she lost her phone, so he wasn't too worried, but still he decided to ask her college friends to check up on her. However, when her friends got to her apartment, Micaela wasn't there. They looked everywhere for her and saw that on top of the bed was her packed bag for the weekend. So to them, it was clear that she hadn't left yet. Now, Alejandro was worried that something was wrong. Her friends began searching in parks and plazas for Micaela, and they even called local hospitals to see if maybe something had happened to her, but there was literally no sign of her. Alejandro knew that he just had to contact Micaela's parents right away. He told them that her friends went to the police station to report her as a missing person, but that the officers really weren't paying attention to them. They just kind of dismissed Micaela's disappearance and were like, oh my gosh, she's 21 years old, she's probably just partying, or you know what, she'll be back on her own, she's old enough to make her own decisions. And they were just saying things that didn't even make any sense. If her friends are there to report her as missing, it's because she's missing. So the friends and the family were of course very frustrated, but thanks to their persistence, police finally filed an official missing persons report. With this, an intense search for Micaela began immediately. Authorities started by questioning those closest to her, including her boyfriend Alejandro, since the two had argued the night that she went missing, and of course because romantic partners are often looked at first in cases like this, he was immediately considered a person of interest very early on. However, after questioning the boyfriend and, questioning Micaela's inner circle, the boyfriend and her friends were quickly cleared of any involvement. During the investigation, a neighbor named Nancy actually came forward with something that stood out to her. She told investigators that the early morning hours around the time that Micaela would have been walking home, she heard a woman screaming. She says her voice was desperate and terrified, crying out for help, begging them to stop hurting her and to not kill her. This account then led investigators to consider the possibility that more than one person was involved in Micaela's disappearance. Adding to the suspicion that something bad happened to her, Nancy also found a sandal nearby that was later confirmed to belong to Micaela. It was a sandal she was wearing that night. The sandal was discovered just 2 blocks away from her apartment. Another key piece of information then came from a truck driver. He told authorities that while driving through the same area, he actually noticed a woman's leg kind of like sticking out at the bottom of the car door, and on the foot was a sandal that looked just like the one that the neighbor Nancy had found. Now, he hadn't seen or heard anything else at the time, but that image just stuck with him, like, why is a woman's leg sticking out of this car? When he later saw the news reports about Micaela's disappearance and the recovered sandal, he realized, like, oh my gosh, that's the same sandal I saw the night she disappeared. With this, authorities believed that Micaela had been abducted. Investigators immediately tried to retrieve any surveillance footage from the public street cameras near the nightclub, but as in many cases, none of them were working. So they turned to local businesses and nearby homes, hoping that like Ring cameras or private security cameras might have caught something useful. Now, the club did have footage from that night and had video footage of Micaela leaving the club, but again, since no one knew exactly like which route or path that she took after leaving, detectives had to do a lot of footwork. You know, they were going around knocking on doors, reviewing hours of footage, and piecing together a route from like all of these different scattered clips. This was obviously going to take some time, and as they began assembling the route and the timeline, something caught their attention. A dark-colored Renault 18 brake with heavily tinted windows had been circling the area around the club as early as 5:04 a.m. Now, this car drew even more attention when additional surveillance footage showed it clearly following Micaela the minute that she stepped out of the club. The car was following, Micaela, moving slowly and suspiciously right behind her. Right away, investigators knew that this car could be important. After a closer look at the surveillance footage, they were able to make out a license plate number, which then led them to a man named Sebastián Wagner. A background check quickly revealed that he had a criminal record. He had actually been convicted of 2 essays in 2012 and had been out on parole for about a year now. So now detectives had footage of a car following Micaela slowly and suspiciously, and now they knew that the owner of this car was a convicted sex offender literally out on parole. That was more than enough for investigators to consider him the prime suspect in Micaela's disappearance. So, who was Sebastián? Sebastián José Luis Wagner was 30 years old and was born on February 18, 1987 in Concepción de Uruguay, the same town as Micaela. People often called him El Mei, a nickname he got because he had a twin. Now, mellizo is another Spanish word for twin. It's kind of like gemelo or like cuate. Now, I wasn't able to find much about his early life, but when he got older, Sebastián began working in a meat processing plant where he was in charge of actually like slaughtering the animals. And like we know, he had a criminal record. In July of 2010, Sebastián assaulted a young woman after violently beating her and stealing her belongings. According to her, she noticed that she was being followed while walking home after her college classes. To stay safe, she stepped into a store and waited, hoping that the man, being Sebastián, would just move on and leave her alone. After a few minutes of waiting and believing that the coast was clear, she eventually continued her walk home. But Sebastián hadn't left. He had been waiting, hiding around a corner, and continued following her home. When she arrived at her house, he then forced his way inside and attacked her. She said, quote, "He hit me various times in the head and me, all in 20 minutes. He left me full of bruises." Once Sebastián left, she then rushed out of her house, unclothed after Sebastián left, and asked her neighbors for help. It was just a terrifying situation. The fact that she waited in a store and, did what she's supposed to do, like go somewhere safe, wait, make sure it clears out, and then she went home. But this guy was hiding and just waiting for her outside of the store. It's just so scary. So then, just 4 months later, in November of 2010, Sebastián attacked again, this time forcing a different young woman into his car and essaying her in the park. After then being singled out by both victims and numerous eyewitnesses, Sebastián was arrested and taken to trial. During the trial, a third essay accusation was brought up. But this third one, unfortunately, was not able to be proven because Sebastián actually accused his twin brother, Max, of committing the crime, which of course complicated things. Which is just crazy. The fact that he would throw his own brother under the bus is insane. So to make a clear distinction between the two, more advanced forensic DNA analysis would have to be, needed. That way they could test like the DNA of which twin. But this was going to be something like very expensive and not readily available to the court at that time. So yeah, they decided to not do that, and without enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt which twin was actually responsible, and on top of that, this witness didn't really get a good look at the attacker's face, the case was just dropped and no one was charged for that assault. In the end, Sebastián was only convicted of the first 2 essays and then sentenced to 9 years in prison. So yeah, he's obviously not a good person, he's disgusting, and he remained in prison, but in July of 2016, something controversial happened. The judge in charge of, sentencing in Gualeguaychú, Carlos Alfredo Rossi, granted him conditional release despite unanimous expert consensus that he posed an ongoing threat. Literally every single professional body involved in the case had advised against his release. The Criminological Technical Team, the Correctional Council of Penal Unit Number 9, where Sebastián was serving time, and even Judge Rossi's own interdisciplinary team all submitted damning reports. Each evaluation concluded that Sebastián was literally not ready to re-enter society and explicitly recommended that he remained in prison. Yet, Judge Rossi disregarded every single warning. Against the evidence, against expert judgment, and common sense, he freed a convicted rapist. Sebastián's release came with several strict conditions. He had to establish a permanent residence and avoid nightclubs, alcohol, and drugs. He was also required to find a job or enroll in educational programs. Additionally, he was strictly forbidden from contacting any of his previous victims. If he did happen to, accidentally encounter them in public, he had to keep a distance of at least 100 meters. Lastly, Sebastián was ordered to attend monthly psychotherapy sessions to address issues related to sexual violence and addiction, and he was also required to check in with the courts once a month. So yeah, he had all of these rules that he had to follow, but no amount of conditions could honestly justify the judge's decision. Literally everyone was like, don't let this man out, and he did. Sebastián was not supposed to be let out of prison, but unfortunately he was. He was allowed to enter society once again. Sebastián found a job and actually moved in with a new girlfriend named Nora, whom he met while he was in prison. Nora had been going to the prison to visit her brother who was incarcerated, and during one of those visits, she met Sebastián. Now, she was aware of his criminal past, but chose to give him a second chance, believing or hoping that he could turn his life around. She said that Sebastián obeyed the conditions that the judge had ordered, and she saw him trying to better himself, so she decided to give him a chance. Now, Nora has 3 sons and 4 daughters, and said Sebastián was only ever nice to all of them, that he was nice to her kids and nice to herself. She said that he never laid a hand on her or threatened her or anything like that, so in her mind, she saw a changed man. I don't know, I honestly think it's crazy to let a man who has that criminal record into your life, especially when you have 4 daughters. So yeah, that was that, but 8 months after his release, he fell right back into old patterns. In April of 2017, Daniel, the father of a 13-year-old girl, went to the police station to report Sebastián for inappropriately touching his daughter and for sending her very inappropriate messages. Daniel says that this all began in February of 2017 when his daughter went to Sebastián's house to hang out with one of Nora's daughters, along with some other kids. They were all gonna go swimming, so at one point, Daniel's daughter went into another room to change her clothes. He said, quote, "That's when he appeared," referring to Sebastián. No one knew where he came from. He tried to grope her, but she fought back, kicked him, and managed to escape. Now, his daughter didn't tell anyone about this, but then she received some very disturbing messages from Sebastián online shortly after, and that's when she confessed everything to her parents. She showed them the messages from Sebastián, which read, "You have no idea how much I want to touch you again. Remember when you kicked me and ran away? I can't stop thinking about touching you again. Next time, I'll tie you up so you can't run. When I get you, you'll be mine. You got away last time, but next time you won't. I'm going to make you mine. Just wait and see." Just wow, my heart breaks for this young girl who was going through this. These messages are so frightening, and what's honestly shocking is that nothing was done by the authorities. Yeah, I don't understand how the police could hear this story and read these messages but not arrest Sebastián. I also wonder how Nora reacted to this. Or did she even know about this? Did she even know what her boyfriend did to one of her daughter's friends? Honestly, it's all just crazy. Shortly after this incident, Sebastián was actually considered a prime suspect in another crime, this time in the disappearance of Micaela. Now, again, he should have never been released early from prison. It hadn't even been a year since his release, and he was already involved in 2 crimes. When Micaela's parents heard about Sebastián's past and learned that he was the owner of the car who was following her that night, they had different reactions. Her mom, Andrea, got a gut feeling that Micaela might not come back, but her father, Nestor, said that he still had hope that Micaela was going to be found and returned home. He said he'd tell himself that if Micaela was essayed, that she was strong and could heal from it. So yeah, he was holding on to hope that his little girl could return home and could heal from this with the support of her family. He just wanted his little girl back. They had no idea where their daughter was, and it was just so agonizing. Micaela's hometown of Concepción del Uruguay was just filled with grief as they marched and demanded that Micaela be searched for properly. Hundreds of people gathered in the streets holding signs, chanting her name, and just urging authorities to not drop the ball. But it wasn't just one march, it was multiple in both Micaela's hometown and in Gualeguay, as well as people camping out for days, refusing to go home until real action was taken in the case. Friends and classmates of Micaela were giving interviews to local and national news outlets. I mean, they were doing everything that they could to raise awareness and just keep her name and keep her story in the public eye. Her photo was circulating all over social media, it was all over the news, and within days, the entire community and much of the country knew Micaela's name. The nightclub where she was last seen saw this grief amongst the community and actually announced that it would remain closed for the upcoming weekend. They said that the town was in no condition to party and have fun, while a young woman from their community remained missing. I thought that was a really nice thing for them to do, for them to show support that way. Now, going back to the investigation, authorities in Gualeguay were able to locate Sebastián's car at his place of work, which was at the car wash/tire repair place. Sebastián had been working there for around 2 or 3 months at this point, and I wasn't really able to find information about what his previous jobs were, the ones that he got right when he was released from prison, but his most recent one was at this car shop, which was actually in front of a very frequented motel by truck drivers passing through called Camaus. So authorities were like, okay, maybe something happened at the hotel. So they went to go search around the hotel. They looked around, they looked at the security cameras, but there was no sign of Micaela entering the hotel. So then they went back to square one and were like, okay, let's shift our focus back to the car wash. The car had been abandoned there and appeared to have been thoroughly washed inside and out. There was also a vacuum inside the car with the vacuum bag full of material, as well as a pair of sneakers with stains, a muddy palm print on a deodorant tube, as well as a muddy palm print on the dashboard. There was also hair, fingerprints on the rear view mirror, and bodily fluid, which could have been saliva, urine, or blood on the car seat. There was a shovel covered in dirt found near the car, which could be evidence, but it seemed unlikely to investigators considering there was construction being done where the car was found. Regardless, all of this was taken into evidence. Right away, forensic teams quickly began examining all of these things, along with the contents of the vacuum bag, to determine if there was any evidence that could link Micaela to this vehicle. And there was. Micaela's hair was found inside the vacuum bag, placing Micaela inside Sebastián's car. Now that investigators had the car, they turned their attention to the owner of the car wash and the tire shop where it had been found. The owner was 35-year-old Nestor Roberto Pavon. Now, yes, Micaela's dad is also named Nestor, just in case you guys were confused, they do have the same name. Now, this Nestor, the owner of the car wash, told police that he had seen his employee, Sebastián, on the night that Micaela disappeared. According to him, Sebastián showed up at the car wash at around 9 p.m. on Friday, visibly upset. He told Nestor that he had just gotten into a very serious fight with his girlfriend Nora and was just feeling hopeless, saying things like nothing in his life ever went right and was kind of hinting that he wanted to end it all. Sebastián also mentioned that he didn't think he could go back home that night due to the big fight that he had with Nora, and then he also mentioned that he hadn't eaten anything at all. Nestor tried to console him and offered to take him out for food. Before they officially headed out to go get something to eat, Sebastián took a shower at Nestor's house. Then the two of them, along with Nestor's 13-year-old son, went out to eat. Nestor explained that he didn't want to leave Sebastián alone that night, especially given how down and emotional he seemed. He said that, yeah, he was fully aware of Sebastián's criminal past and knew he was under, special conditions that required monthly therapy sessions and regular check-ins with the court. But he says that he always just tried to help Sebastián turn his life around, whether that meant like lending him money, helping him get a car, or just trying to keep him on the right path. He claimed that he genuinely wanted to see Sebastián do better in life. So on this night, he did just that. He tried to distract Sebastián from whatever issues he was having at home to prevent him from doing something dumb. Nestor told authorities that after dinner and hanging out for a bit, at around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, Sebastián dropped Nestor back at home, and that was that. The next day, late on Saturday, Sebastián returned to the car wash, but not to work. He came just to pick up his paycheck and ask if he could wash his own car. Nestor said that he was really annoyed by this. He was annoyed that Sebastián had missed his shift and was now showing up to just collect money and basically clean his car. Nestor was actually getting ready to go home and end his workday, so he told Sebastián okay, I guess you can wash the car, just do it quickly. Then on Monday, Sebastián came in for work, but left suddenly in the middle of his shift. He told some coworkers he couldn't work like this, and everyone says that he was visibly upset. Concerned, Nestor says he called him later that day and was like, hey, what's going on? If you're not going to be a reliable worker, I need to know so I can hire someone else. Sebastián said that he just wasn't feeling well and again mentioned just not wanting to keep living. So Nestor said that he tried to encourage him and chose to give him some space. That, he said, was the last interaction that he had with Sebastián. Then he says that on Tuesday around midday, Sebastián's girlfriend Nora showed up at the car wash looking for him. But Nestor told her that Sebastián hadn't come in at all that day. I know that was so much information. There's a lot of different statements from different people. So it's going to be a lot of information, but all of this is very important. Now, before we continue talking about what else Nestor revealed, let's kind of take a moment and switch over to Nora's perspective during all of this. She told investigators that the very last time that she saw her boyfriend was very early that same morning that she went to go look for him at the car wash, which was again on Tuesday, April 4th at around 3 a.m. She also shared what she remembered about that Saturday when Micaela disappeared. That morning, Sebastián had returned home at around 9 o'clock in the morning, looking dirty and disheveled. He had mud all over him and visible scratches on his neck, which stood out to both Nora and her son, 21-year-old Gabriel. When Nora asked what had happened, Sebastián just vaguely said that he had been out in the fields with a friend and that their car got stuck in the mud, but he actually got defensive when Nora pressed for more details. After that, he went to sleep for the rest of the day. Nora's son, Gabriel, ended up cleaning and vacuuming Sebastián's car, which was also full of dirt and mud since he sometimes used it too and wanted a clean car. Nora says that the following day, Sunday, Sebastián stayed home and continued sleeping all day. Then on Monday, very late, basically in the very early hours of Tuesday morning at around 3 a.m., Sebastián told Nora that he was heading to work because a car needed to be washed. Now, of course, she thought this was weird, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so who needs a car wash at that time? Sometimes he did work night shifts, but never at this time. Still, she told him to let her know when he arrived at work, but then she just never heard from him. Which brings us back to that moment later that Tuesday when Nora showed up at the car wash looking for Sebastián. Nestor told her that there hadn't been any cars scheduled for a wash at 3 o'clock in the morning, and also again just reiterated that Sebastián never showed up for his shift at all. So yeah, that's Nora's testimony of what happened during that time. Now, going back to Nestor, he said that later that same afternoon, he noticed Sebastián's car was in the lot of the car wash. Now, he figured that maybe Sebastián had arrived and was in the bathroom or just getting food before starting his shift. But again, Sebastián just never appeared. Nestor said he tried calling him but got no response, and that was that. So yeah, that was Nestor's testimony to police, and as soon as they heard it, they kind of got some red flags. Investigators just kind of noticed some inconsistencies and missing details, and then they soon uncovered the truth. It turns out that Nestor had actively helped Sebastián flee town to avoid being arrested. I know, at first I thought that this guy was being so honest and helpful to the police and that he was just trying to, solve this case, but it turns out he was actually helping Sebastián. He was helping this guy leave and avoid punishment. On the evening of Monday, April 3rd, 2017 at 8:35 p.m., Nestor called a truck driver named Eduardo. He asked Eduardo to secretly transport Sebastián inside the cabin of his cargo truck to the city of Campana. To support Sebastián while he was basically on the run, Nestor gave him 5,000 pesos for food and for any other expenses. But Nestor didn't stop there. He also coordinated with Sebastián's stepfather, 53-year-old Jose, to then pick up Sebastián once he arrived in Campana. Jose was actually an officer and a retired officer of the army, yet he was literally helping Sebastián escape and avoid getting arrested and avoid justice. So yeah, that was basically the plan that Nestor had created to help Sebastián flee the police. The next morning, on Tuesday, April 4th at 8:30 in the morning, Jose met Sebastián in Campana and drove him to the home of his mother, Gabriela. Sebastián then stayed there until around 1:30 in the morning on April 5th, when Jose then drove him to another house, this time to the home of a woman named Marina, which is an acquaintance of Jose. To basically convince Marina to take Sebastián in, Jose lied, saying that Sebastián was his wife's nephew and that he was simply looking for work. Later that day, at around noon, Jose then drove both Sebastián and Marina to the local train station. Surveillance cameras actually captured them together, but after that, Sebastián's whereabouts basically became unknown. I know, crazy, like, again, so much information, but the way that Nestor put in so much work and so much of his own money to help his employee, Sebastián, escape is just insane. And then the fact that Sebastián's own stepfather also helped him, like, flee, it's just all way too much. Police were just confused. They're like, why would you help an employee this much? Like, why would you coordinate a truck driver to help get him out of the city? Why would you then call his stepdad to help out? Why would you give him money? Especially because, again, Sebastián is a convicted rapist. So why was Nestor going through all of these lengths to help him? So yeah, with this new revelation that Sebastián's boss, Nestor, and Sebastián's stepfather, Jose, had helped him basically flee, on Thursday, April 6th, both Nestor and Jose were detained and placed in preventative custody for the alleged assistance in concealing a crime. Jose was arrested actually just a few houses down from Sebastián's mother's home. Not only were Nestor and Jose detained for the concealment of the crime, but also Nora's son, Gabriel, the one that I mentioned earlier, for actually being an alleged co-perpetrator, not for concealing the crime. I know. Now, this is because a witness who saw the car that night that Micaela disappeared singled Gabriel out during a lineup and accused him of being in the car with Sebastián that night. And police also arrested him for being the one who cleaned and vacuumed Sebastián's car. So all three of them declared their innocence, and we'll touch on them a little bit more shortly, but yeah, these three people were in custody for helping cover up Sebastián's crime, and Gabriel for being accused of being a co-perpetrator. But still, Sebastián was nowhere to be found. As officers hunted for Sebastián, the search for Micaela continued with equal urgency. They centered their focus on a tip from a fisherman who claimed that on early Saturday morning, he spotted something suspicious. Someone was throwing what appeared to be a very heavy object into the river. This lead then prompted a massive response in that area. Over 100 officers equipped with trucks, motorcycles, ATVs, drones, dive gear, horses, and helicopters, along with so many other people, joined this extensive operation to find her. Even canines were there, which were using the scent from her sandal to trace Micaela's whereabouts. There was also a reward of 500,000 Argentinian pesos being offered for any information that could lead police to Micaela. The following day, on Friday, April 7th, search parties actually found Micaela's skis, her shorts, her shirt, and her other sandal in the grassy outskirts of Gualeguay. This wasn't a good sign. Micaela's family was still holding on to hope that she would be found alive, but after the discovery of her belongings, their hope was fading. On this same day, more marches were held. Hundreds of people gathered in two plazas over 400 kilometers apart, one in Micaela's hometown and one in Gualeguay. People held signs with Micaela's photo and they wore shirts with her name on them. They were raising awareness about Micaela's disappearance and just demanding more help in her search, as well as encouraging anyone with information about the prime suspect, Sebastián, to please just come forward and turn him in. It had now been a week since Micaela disappeared, and everyone just wanted to bring her home and just bring answers and closure to her family. While marches were being held, later that same day, investigators continued searching for Sebastián in his mother's hometown. Since Nestor and Jose told authorities that that's where they helped him flee to, they had teams searching the homes in the area, and that's when they actually got a tip from neighbors who reported seeing Sebastián's mother take food out to like a little hut slash shack that she had behind her property. And of course that stood out, like who was she giving food in that hut? Now, before police could even go search the mom's house, Sebastián's own mother actually called the police, letting them know that Sebastián was at her house. Police then went there, they stormed the house, and Sebastián actually tried shooting himself in the head, but the moment that he pulled the trigger, the didn't go off, and police rushed to detain him. After this, Sebastián was taken back to Gualeguay. Sebastián's mother, Gabriela, said, quote, "I never hit him like they say. Fate brought him back, and I handed him over to the authorities because that's how it had to be. Not to save myself like people claim, but for Micaela." After Sebastián was taken into custody, he was charged with aggravated sexual assault and aggravated homicide, with aggravated factors including treachery, femicide, and criminis causa, meaning that he murdered Micaela to conceal the sexual assault. Authorities decided to place him in isolation to ensure that he remained mentally and physically fit to stand trial, monitoring him 24 hours a day to prevent suicide. Eventually, though, Sebastián just confessed to everything. He admitted to killing Micaela, and he told investigators exactly where they could find her body. But he also claimed that he didn't act alone. According to Sebastián, his boss, Nestor, was involved from the very beginning, not with just helping him flee or helping him, get transportation to run away, but with the crime itself. Sebastián said that after having dinner with Nestor and his 13-year-old son, they dropped the son off and then they began hunting for a victim. That's exactly what he said. He literally used that word. As they were hunting, that's when they found Micaela. Sebastián says that they then forced her into his car, they beat her, they took turns essaying her, one driving while the other did this to her, and then drove her to the outskirts of the city, where they killed her and left her body. So initially he said that they both killed Micaela, but we'll see later how his story changes, because honestly, with Sebastián, you never know if he's actually telling the truth. On the morning of Saturday, April 8th, a week after her disappearance, Micaela's body was discovered on the outskirts of the city in a remote, grassy area. She was found beneath a tree, completely unclothed and already in an advanced state of decomposition. There were visible marks around her neck, and the spot where she was found was about 3 kilometers away from where her clothing and keys had been previously recovered. An autopsy later confirmed that Micaela had died from strangulation and that she had been essayed. She also had defensive wounds. Based on the condition of her body, forensic experts determined that Micaela most likely died on the same day that she went missing. Investigators initially examined the vegetation found on Micaela's body to see if it matched the surrounding area. That way they could determine whether she had been, killed in that location or if her body had been moved there afterward. While that testing was still underway at the time, authorities already believed that the assault likely occurred inside Sebastián's vehicle and that her body had been left at the scene afterward, which this actually was later confirmed by the forensic team. Further analysis also showed that Micaela had never been in the locations where her clothing and her keys were discovered. Investigators concluded that those items were most likely left there and discarded there by the suspect in an attempt to eliminate evidence or to mislead authorities. Despite these findings, one major setback remained: the lack of DNA evidence. No foreign DNA was recovered from Micaela's body. According to the director of criminalistics for the Entre Rios police, the advanced decomposition made it impossible to collect bodily fluids such as in cases like this, the breakdown of tissue in both the victim and any potential perpetrator can cause genetic material to deteriorate or mix, making the DNA testing nearly impossible. This obviously was a major disappointment for the investigative team. They had hoped to find DNA, 100% linking Sebastián, who at this point again had already confessed to the crime, or at the very least, to use this DNA to identify if anyone else was involved. As it stood, the only physical evidence connecting Sebastián to Micaela was her hair, which was found inside the vacuum bag from the car. As the director Angel explained, despite the lack of definitive forensic DNA evidence, no signs have emerged so far to suggest that anyone else participated in the crime. While investigators were facing frustration over the limitations of the forensic evidence, Micaela's family was grappling with a very different kind of moment, one that was very emotional and unexpected. The day after Micaela's body was found on Sunday, April 9th, 2017, her family received a call from someone entirely unexpected: Pope Francis himself. Micaela's father, Nestor, recalls lying in bed when the phone rang. He answered and was told that it was the Pope wanting to speak to him and to Micaela's mother. The dad just jumped out of bed and ran to the kitchen to tell Andrea. They just couldn't believe that the Pope was literally on the line wanting to speak to them. The news of Micaela's death literally reached the Vatican, and Pope Francis wanted to personally extend his heartfelt condolences. Though the call only lasted like 5 minutes, for Micaela's parents, it felt like time had slowed down. In those few minutes, in the middle of their grief, they felt acknowledged, they felt comforted, and not alone. Just 2 days later, that grief became even heavier as Micaela's family and the community gathered to lay her to rest. Her funeral was held on April 11th, 2017, and it was just a completely devastating day. No one is ever ready to see their loved one in a coffin. It's just so unfair that Sebastián, or I guess as we'll see later, perhaps Nestor as well, subjected this many people to this. He ruined so many people's lives, and above all, he took away Micaela's. The family held a brief wake in Oro Verde, and they decided to have a larger open wake at the gymnasium of the Physical Education Center in Concepción del Uruguay, Micaela's hometown. Micaela's father said that they wanted the ceremony to be different as she would have wanted. During the wake, videos about Micaela's life and music were played. The family asked the attendees to not bring flowers, but instead, they requested that donations be made to a fund that they wanted to set up to create a foundation dedicated to supporting, all of the ideals and commitments that Micaela cared about. There was one other very emotional moment during the wake. It was when one of Micaela's favorite singers, Indio Solari, reached out to her family to honor her memory. He offered his condolences and sang Micaela's favorite song. Her parents placed the phone near a microphone, allowing everyone that was there to listen to what he was singing. At the end of the call, he spoke of Micaela as a young, inspiring woman and just reminded everyone that she would have wanted them to keep moving forward and to keep living life to the fullest. After the wake, a funeral procession escorted her body to the cemetery. Micaela was now laid to rest, and her loved ones had to say their final goodbyes. This funeral just marked a moment of collective mourning, but it also marked the beginning of outrage. As more details about Sebastián came to light and about his prior convictions, his early release despite professional warnings, and the failures in monitoring him, public outrage intensified. Even Sebastián's own family was shaken by this. His twin brother Max spoke out publicly and he condemned his brother's actions. He said, quote, "I couldn't believe he was free. If someone isn't well, they shouldn't be free. They should be in prison." The twin also revealed that he hadn't even spoken to his brother Sebastián in years and made it very clear that he did not stand by him, adding, quote, "We may look alike, but I have a different heart. If I were a judge, I wouldn't wish the death penalty on anyone, but someone like him should never be released. A person like that is better off behind bars than out here among people." He also said that he feels like he can't even offer his condolences to Micaela's family or even see them to, apologize or just kind of comfort them because he looks like the perpetrator. He looks like his twin brother who murdered their daughter. So just by him even going up to the family or approaching them is just enough to cause rage and to just make things worse. He did profusely apologize for his brother's actions and said that from that day, he was no longer a brother to him. Their mother, Gabriela, also spoke out to the media, clearly devastated. She was being called all sorts of names and accused of protecting her son and of hiding him. She actually had to close all of her social media accounts because people were sending her very nasty messages. She, reiterated that she wasn't protecting Sebastián, that she was the one who called the police and turned him in so that they could arrest him, saying, quote, "I knew I had to call the police because it was the right thing to do and so that Micaela's soul could finally rest in peace." She also defended herself against public judgment, saying that she wasn't a bad mother. Referring to, her other son, Sebastián's twin, Max, she said, "Look, I raised one good son." It is kind of crazy how someone can grow up in the same home with the same parents and the same values and still turn out to be a monster. It's a reminder that some people make conscious choices to harm no matter where they come from. Gabriela also said her husband, Jose, who was again in custody for an alleged cover-up, should be released because all he did was try to remove Sebastián from her house after discovering that he was armed. While awaiting trial alongside Nestor, Jose, and Gabriel, Sebastián told the prosecutor on the case, Ignacio, that he actually wanted to send a message to Micaela's parents. He claimed to feel remorse and asked the prosecutor to pass along this apology. It's crazy. Why would they ever want to hear that? But whatever the weight that apology might have carried quickly crumbled. Less than 4 months later, in August of 2017, the same exact day that Micaela would have turned 22 years old, a photo surfaced on social media showing Sebastián smiling casually next to another inmate, who was actually incarcerated for aggravated essay as well. In this picture, he seemed relaxed, cheerful, and obviously was showing no sign of remorse for what he did. Not only did this come across as very disrespectful, but it also violated prison rules since inmates are not allowed to have access to phones or the internet. As a result, prison authorities placed Sebastián back in isolation, stating that he had once again shown that he was incapable of following the rules. Whatever apology he made, it was hard to believe that it was sincere, and it just made things worse for Micaela's family and for the public. The day after Sebastián took this selfie, Micaela's mom said, quote, "Honestly, that selfie hit us really hard, especially because yesterday would have been my daughter's 22nd birthday. What more can I say? It's painful and infuriating to see the man who killed Micaela taking photos of himself in prison, smiling like nothing ever happened. Yesterday wasn't just any day. It wasn't easy. We were commemorating Micaela's birthday. She would have turned 22, so a small group of us gathered in her tomb in the cemetery. We released 22 white and purple balloons. White represents purity, and purple is the color associated with gender-based violence. And besides, Micaela really liked that color." I don't know how Sebastián found out it was Micaela's birthday. Maybe he saw it on the foundation's Facebook page where we posted about remembering her birthday. Now, the trial for Sebastián, Nestor, and Gabriel was set for September of 2017, and as it approached, Micaela's family and much of the community were anxiously waiting for justice to be served. Of the three, Gabriel was the only one who was actually under house arrest while awaiting for his trial. Sebastián's stepfather, Jose, wasn't included in this trial since he had actually already been sentenced to 2.5 years for helping cover up the crime in a separate expedited process. So yeah, Jose had his own trial. It was way quicker than how Sebastián and Nestor's trial was going. And yeah, he was found guilty. So now it was just Sebastián, his former boss Nestor, and Gabriel, Nora's son, facing the courtroom. The trial officially began on September 21st, 2017, with a total of 57 witnesses expected to testify. Now, in the trial, Sebastián was completely denying murdering Micaela. He did acknowledge essaying her, but he was now claiming that he took no part in murdering her, placing all of the blame on Nestor. Now he was saying something completely different from what he initially said during his confession. Sebastián said that after he took his turn at essaying Micaela, he stepped out of the vehicle to do some drugs, and during that short time when he was away, Nestor murdered her, which makes no sense since he was the one who led authorities to Micaela's body in the first place. As for Nestor, he said that he took no part in this crime at all and that he only gave Sebastián money to leave the city because he was fighting with his girlfriend, so he wanted to help him, get some space, not help him flee from committing a terrible crime. He also said the person who killed Micaela was, quote, "someone very close to Sebastián," who he later said was Gabriel, Nora's son. But the prosecution planned to prove that Nestor did have a part in the essay and in the murder of Micaela, pointing out multiple contradictions in Nestor's statements, and again the fact that he literally helped him flee. Meanwhile, Gabriel's name barely came up in the testimonies of either Sebastián or Nestor, apart from, again, Nestor trying to blame Gabriel for killing Micaela. One witness claimed to have seen Gabriel in the car used during the kidnapping, which again was the main reason why he was arrested in the first place, apart from washing the vehicle, but beyond that, there really was no substantial evidence linking him directly to the crime besides that witness statement. Gabriel himself maintained his innocence during initial questioning, stating that his role was limited to just cleaning the car, that he had no knowledge of what Sebastián had done prior, that again the only reason he cleaned it is because he would sometimes use the car and just didn't want to drive it when it was dirty. His defense also echoed this, arguing that if Gabriel had been complicit, he would have disposed of incriminating items like the vacuum or the vacuum bag, but since police just found those items so easily, they suggested that this is because he was innocent, because he didn't know he had to get rid of those things to hide evidence. After weeks of testimony, mounting evidence, and emotional courtroom moments, on October 17th, 2017, the court delivered its verdict. Sebastián was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. According to the judges, the evidence clearly showed that he acted alone. They concluded that on April 1st, 2017, shortly after 5:45 a.m., the day Micaela disappeared, Sebastián attacked Micaela after following her in his car as she walked home from the nightclub. When he reached her, they say that he pulled her into the car through the front passenger door. Micaela resisted, and during the struggle, one of her sandals fell off, which, like I mentioned, was later recovered by a neighbor. Sebastián's car then remained parked at the scene for around 10 minutes. Then at 5:56 a.m., with Micaela still inside the car, he drove toward an area near the recycling plant where he stayed for approximately 35 minutes. After that, he spent a couple of hours just driving around the city. By 8:30 in the morning, camera footage showed his car in the area where Micaela's body was later discovered. The court ruled that during that time, Sebastián R-worded and murdered her. This was supported by forensic evidence found in the vacuum bag from Sebastián's car, which, like I said, contained Micaela's hair and vegetation, matching the site where her body was found. Additional proof came from multiple sources, from security footage, from witness testimonies, including the man who saw a woman's leg sticking out of Sebastián's car door, wearing the sandal found on the street, including the woman who heard Micaela screaming, and also another man who saw Sebastián near the body disposal site at the same time he was seen driving in that area. Now, as for Nestor, the court rejected Sebastián's claims that he was involved. The judges said that Sebastián had fabricated a story to shift the blame and reduce his sentence, even as a form of revenge against Nestor, the only person who knew where he had fled after the crime and whose information ultimately led to his arrest. They pointed out the many inconsistencies in Sebastián's story, including changing how he claimed Nestor killed Micaela, first saying that it was with the rope, then with his hands, all while admitting he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the same time. At one point, he even said, "Maybe I did it, but I don't remember." The judges concluded that his version of events just couldn't be trusted. In the end, they dismissed his statements as manipulative attempts to avoid full responsibility for what he did. When it came to Nestor, the court found that there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him of or murder. However, they did find enough evidence to convict him of aggravated concealment for essentially helping Sebastián escape after the crime. For this, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Gabriel, on the other hand, was acquitted of everything. The court ruled that he literally had no knowledge of the crime when he cleaned and vacuumed Sebastián's car. When Micaela's family heard this news, even her father hugged Gabriel. They honestly believed in his innocence from day one, and it was a shame that he was on house arrest and was unable to provide for his family during that time and was basically paying the price for Sebastián's lies and actions. Micaela's family felt a sense of relief when Sebastián was sentenced to life in prison, but to them, it wasn't full justice. From the very beginning, they honestly believed that Nestor had played a much larger role in the crime, not just in helping Sebastián escape, but in the abduction, the essay, and the murder of Micaela itself. One of the biggest doubts centered on how Nestor's defense claimed Sebastián got Micaela into the car. It was said during the trial that Sebastián reached over from the driver's seat and pulled her in through the front passenger door. But Micaela's family and their legal team never believed that. They knew that Micaela was, strong. She was physically and mentally strong. So the idea that a man could pull her into a car from across the seat without help, especially as she fought back, just didn't really make sense. It seemed far more likely that someone else, someone like Nestor, had been with him and helped force her into the vehicle. And the fact that if Sebastián was alone and did in fact get Micaela in the car somehow, the vehicle maybe would have swerved from Micaela defending himself and only having one hand on the wheel. But in the video surveillance, the car remained straight and steady. Plus, how would Sebastián essay her while driving at the same time? It just didn't really make any sense, and I was watching a lot of news reporters kind of recreate this and trying to figure out, is it possible for him to be in the driver's seat and somehow open the passenger door and abduct someone without getting out? It doesn't really seem possible. I saw all of this and just knew that it wasn't just Sebastián that night. Even during the trial, it was said that Sebastián got Micaela in the car by hitting her on the head, but her autopsy showed no head trauma. So, again, the family just knew that it was more than one person. So, apart from this, there were also messages. During the trial, one piece of evidence that stood out was a disturbing message that Sebastián had sent to one of Nora's oldest daughters on the very night that Micaela went missing. In the message, Sebastián asked for the phone number of any of her friends who would be willing to do stuff with him and Nestor. He made it clear that they were both looking to be with a woman that night. Which, what? How does that even make sense? Why is he asking his girlfriend's daughter for help getting a woman? It does not make any sense. Just very, very weird. But the fact that he was saying that him and Nestor were looking for someone is what makes the family believe that they were together the night that Micaela was abducted. This, along with Sebastián's initial testimony where he said that he and Nestor were out hunting for women that night. To Micaela's family, this message was crucial. It didn't just show Sebastián's predatory intentions, it tied Nestor to them. It suggested that what happened to Micaela was not a random, impulsive act carried out by Sebastián alone. Instead, it pointed to something far more premeditated, more coordinated, and with more than one person involved, Nestor. even more so with the testimony of the neighbor who claimed that she heard a woman, likely Micaela, screaming for them to let her go during the time that Micaela was abducted. If it was just one person, Micaela wouldn't have referred to more people. And additionally, the reason why Gabriel was arrested in the first place is that a witness said 2 men were in the car that night and she thought it was Gabriel. But as we know, it ended up not being him. So Micaela's family and their legal team believed that it was Nestor in that car, and they also pointed to something that just never sat right with them. Nestor's decision to lie to authorities about Sebastián's whereabouts after the murder. It just struck them as deeply suspicious. Why would he risk legal consequences, knowingly obstructing an investigation and lying to the police for someone he had only known for a couple of months and who was, at the end of the day, just an employee? It wasn't like they were lifelong friends or close family. So why did he have to lie to the police that day? He could have just been like, listen, yeah, I helped my employee get out of town. I gave him money. I helped him, get a truck to drive him because he was arguing with his wife and I wanted to help him. You know what I mean? Why would he lie for just an employee? The defense argued that the only explanation that made sense was that Nestor had something to hide, specifically his own involvement in the crime. By helping Sebastián flee, he wasn't just protecting a coworker out of loyalty, he was protecting himself. He even went as far as, again, giving Sebastián money to flee and offered to send him more if he needed it, or offered to send money to his family members who could then give it to him if he needed more money to just ensure that he stayed away, out of town. I mean, again, he went through so much effort to help Sebastián get away. Again, at the end of the day, why would he do this for just a coworker? He wouldn't. He was doing this, again, to just protect himself and make sure that this guy was away, the guy that could involve him in this crime. Now, again, none of this was considered during the trial. It's crazy and it's just so unfair. To make matters worse, in September of 2020, Nestor was actually released before finishing his sentence after his defense appealed. The court determined that the original 5-year sentence lacked proper justification and that Nestor had already served 3 years and 4 months, enough for conditional release. They said there was no longer a risk of him fleeing or obstructing justice, even though a new trial was still being requested. This just felt like another slap in the face for Micaela's family, but they didn't give up. They kept pushing back, insisting that Nestor be tried again. They argued that the evidence hadn't been properly examined and that he should be charged as a co-perpetrator. So finally, in December of 2024, the court agreed and ordered that Nestor stand trial again, this time not just for helping cover up the crime, but as someone who may have helped commit the crime. After years of relentless effort, Micaela's family finally saw progress. Nestor is now awaiting a new trial and will have to wait and see what happens next. If more information comes out about Nestor's role in Micaela's death or just more information comes out about his trial, I will definitely let you guys know. Micaela's death didn't just leave the community and all of Argentina heartbroken, but also angry at the fact that this literally could have been avoided. Many believed that if the justice system and relevant authorities had approached Sebastián's past crimes through a gender-sensitive lens, recognizing his patterns of violence against women and just understanding the risk posed by him, Micaela might still be here. She might still be alive today. In direct response to the public outcry and the demand for change, National Congress passed legislation known as Ley Micaela. This law mandates that all public servants across the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the national government must receive mandatory training on gender-based violence. Now, in theory, this kind of training can lead to better decisions, judges who understand the patterns of aggressors, police who take victim reports seriously from the start, and public servants who recognize the urgency of protective measures. It's meant to shift mindsets so that the system stops minimizing or ignoring threats against women. But a law is only as effective as its implementation. And as seen in the tragic case of Paula Tacacho that we just covered, government officials who had Paula's case file in their hands did not act with Ley Micaela in mind. Had they, Paula might still be with us today. While the law itself is a very powerful and important step towards change, its impact depends entirely on how seriously it's taken. Ley Micaela has the potential to transform the way institutions respond to gender-based violence, but that requires real commitment. I do truly just hope that moving forward, Ley Micaela is not just seen as a legal requirement for government officials, but is truly embraced in their daily work to ensure that no more lives are lost to the same preventable failures. And in this case, the public wanted Judge Carlos Rossi to be held accountable for his actions, for literally approving Sebastián's early release, despite all the people warning him to not let this man go. So, not long after Micaela's body was found, Judge Rossi requested a 20-day medical leave, citing he was suffering a depressive episode, just as the provincial legislature formally submitted 2 motions to have him impeached. 5 more formal motions were later submitted. Later, the trial against the judge began, and his justification for granting Sebastián early release was that Sebastián had completed a few courses while in prison. He did a graphic design course, he did a baking course, a carpentry course, and an electronic installations course. That was it. Despite multiple psychological and professional reports warning against his release, Judge Rossi dismissed those concerns and basically seemed to think, well, look, he took a baking class, he baked some bread, clearly he's no longer a danger to society, despite what all of you are saying. Yeah, it's absurd and infuriating. During the trial, he also told the jury in the presence of Micaela's parents, quote, "I want you to understand that judges in charge of sentencing don't have a crystal ball to know what will happen after we make a decision. If we did, we wouldn't make some of the decisions that we do." And I get that. You don't have a crystal ball, but your job is to look at all the facts, look at the analysis, look at what other professionals are saying, and make the most sensible decision. Like, just because you couldn't see the future and you couldn't predict that Sebastián would strike again, everyone was telling you that he would. Everyone was literally telling you, do not let this guy go. And honestly, he didn't need a crystal ball to understand what would happen if he was released. In the end, Judge Rossi was actually cleared of any wrongdoing. By July of 2018, he returned to his position as judge like nothing had ever happened. Micaela's family, of course, was very disappointed with the news, but they were going to continue fighting for change in other ways. Like we mentioned earlier, during Micaela's wake, the family requested that visitors not bring any flowers, but rather donations for them to create a foundation in Micaela's honor. They created the Micaela Foundation, which I will have linked down below. There, they share photos and memories of Micaela, just keeping her presence alive. They also spread awareness on Ley Micaela, offering training for public officials on the law, and regularly organize community efforts like food drives and school supply campaigns. In every project, every training, and every event, the foundation carries forward the work that Micaela would have wanted to do herself, had her life not been stolen. Now, all of the amazing work that Micaela's family has been doing has actually become increasingly difficult in 2025 due to strong pushback from President Javier. He has actually announced plans to eliminate femicide as a legal category from Argentina's penal code, a major step backward in the fight against gender-based violence. He has already started dismantling key institutions focused on gender equality and diversity, including offices that support victims of gender-based violence and LGBTQ+ inclusion efforts. Justice Minister Mariano Libarona justified all of this by claiming that femicide laws unfairly prioritize women, calling the concept a distortion of equality. He argued that punishing femicide more severely than other homicides implies that a woman's life is legally worth more than a man, and that this amounts to special treatment. Human rights groups strongly disagree with this. Amnesty International Argentina warned that removing femicide from the penal code would only increase the risks that women and girls already face in the country. Organizations across Argentina were further shocked when the government announced plans to repeal the Ley Micaela. Her family just says that this is absolutely ridiculous and just absolutely crazy. Micaela's life purpose was to help people. She was a natural leader, and it's so sad that the world won't ever get to see the amazing things that she would have accomplished. And now that law that's in her memory, which can save lives, is at risk of being taken away. Micaela's story has just touched so many people, and a journalist named Santiago García, who covered Micaela's case from the very beginning, wrote a book about her life. I will have the book's Instagram page linked down below for you guys to check out. Micaela's family has shared that the book is just wonderfully done and just honors her memory. On what would have been Micaela's 29th birthday in August of 2024, Andrea shared a message on social media that just really touched me. It read, "29 years ago, I touched the sky with my hands and I became a mom. That title you learn with every day, and with each child you gain a new specialty. Today, I just wish I could touch the sky again and have you grab my hand. I love you." I really admire Micaela's family for not giving up in the fight for justice. I hope that justice is served, and that if Nestor is involved, that he is held accountable and punished for what he did to Micaela. Like I said, I will give you guys an update as soon as there is new information, but yeah, let me know what you guys think about this case down below. Do you think that Nestor is involved? What do you think about Sebastián being free to be able to do this? And how do you stay safe when walking alone? What happened to her is just a reminder that we truly don't know what's out there, so it's always important to stay aware, watch out for one another, and to keep pushing for change so that no one else has to go through what she and so many others do who are let down by the justice system. Like I said, Micaela was full of life with dreams and a future ahead of her, and all of that was taken from her in an instant. Her friends and family are left with a huge hole in their lives, and she will be missed forever, but I'm just glad that her legacy is helping to make a change. My heart goes out to her and her loved ones. I hope that she is resting peacefully. Like I said, I hope that she gets the justice that she deserves, so I will definitely keep you guys posted. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to listen to what happened to Micaela. If you guys haven't watched my last video, I will have it linked down below, or you guys can see it in the upcoming screen along with another video. If you would like to keep up with me on my other socials, those will be linked down below as well, and my second channel. If you guys just want a break from true crime, you guys can head over there to listen to a fictional story. This was just such a tough one to listen to. I feel like I just need to turn off my brain right now because it's just engraved in my head what happened to Micaela, and it's just terrible. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this down below. If there are any other cases that you would like me to cover, also let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys again so much for being here, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, familia.